There is a time-honored wedding tradition in which the bride is supposed to bring to the wedding something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. I like that. It reminds me of something that Jesus once said. Every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of the house who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Matthew 13, verse 52. When we prepare to lead the church in congregational worship, I believe it is beneficial to treat that moment like practice for the wedding that is to come. One day, Christ will return for His bride, the church. Oh, what a day that will be. Until that day, we can practice. Now let's talk about this idea of treating each Sunday like a wedding a little more in today's weekly worship thought. As we continually practice for the wedding, I think it is appropriate for the bride, us, to bring to each congregational worship service something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue. What do I mean by that? I'm referring to our song selection as worship leaders. How do you select your songs for each congregational worship service? Are you just using the songs that are most popular today? Do you depend heavily on older songs? Are you singing new, original, and unique songs to the Lord? Is there a place for lamentations in your song service? Personally, I like the approach of treating each congregational worship service like a wedding. Now, practically speaking, this is what I mean. Each congregational worship set list should include something old. I always try to include a hymn in my congregational worship set lists. It's good to be reminded of the fact that the God we sing about today is the same God who has been sung about for generation after generation. We stand on the shoulders of giants when we sing songs about our faithful, never-changing God. Older members of the congregation will appreciate these songs, but it's not just for them. It's also, maybe especially, for the youth. To know that faithful followers of Christ have forged the paths they are now walking themselves is imperative to the future of our faith. Our congregational worship set list should also include something new. Now, in saying something new, I'm referring to a song that is fresh, original, and unique to your specific congregation or context. It is biblical to sing a new song unto the Lord. I always try to include a song that was written by myself or by someone within the congregation or local community when I craft a congregational worship set list. Now, this may not always be immediately possible or practical, but writing songs specifically for your congregation is definitely a gift worth cultivating. If you are not in a position to use new songs written within your ministry context, I would still encourage you to find and use new songs that are written within the broader church context. The bulk of my congregational worship set lists will typically fall into the category of something borrowed. In saying something borrowed, I'm referring to the current, popular, relevant church songs of today. The CCLI Top 100 is a great place to find songs to borrow. These are songs that unite us with millions of other believers around the world who are praying and singing out the exact same songs during their congregational worship services. How powerful is it to join with the saints around the globe as we pour our hearts out to the one true King? Last but not least, we want to be sure to include something blue in our congregational set list. When you read through the Psalms, Israel's original songbook, you will notice that there were many different expressions of worship for the people of Israel. One of those expressions was that of lamentation. The reality is that life is not always pleasant or fun. Sometimes life is tough. Sometimes life is noticeably not fair. If all we ever do on a Sunday morning is celebrate life's victories, we will alienate that large portion of our congregation that doesn't currently feel joyful or victorious. It is good and right to give voice to their situations when we gather as well. I always try to include something blue in my congregational set list as a way of reminding one another that God is still good, even when things are bad. Now let's get practical with what we're learning. I think one of the most practical ways to begin applying this something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue approach is to create a few helpful lists. I would start with a list of hymns or older songs that would fit the category of something old. For simplicity, let's say you were able to identify 13 hymns and 13 older songs that you think have served or could serve your congregation very well. Now that is already a total of 26 songs. If you used one of those songs per week, each song could essentially be used twice throughout the course of 1 year. Again, we are aiming for simplicity here, but I think you get the point. For this week's set list, let's say I prayed about what songs would serve the congregation best, and I decided to use the song It Is Well as one of my old songs. It Is Well is a hymn written in the late 1800s, so it definitely fits the something old category. But it's also a bit of a lamentation. The song was literally written by a guy who was prayerfully responding to losing his daughters in a tragic shipwreck. Definitely something blue. Now in this case, this one song is going to end up checking two boxes for me. Something old and something blue. To pick something new for my set list, I'm going to go ahead and, you guessed it, make another list. I want to make a list of all the original songs that I have written, or songs written by other members of our church which seem to have served the congregation well. In my case, personally, I have way too many original songs to choose from, and they are definitely not all serving the congregation well. So I want to whittle my list down to maybe 10 to 20 strong songs that the congregation seems to enjoy singing. If I decide to use a brand new song, I want to run it through my 3 on, 1 off, 1 on again formula that I shared in chapter 2. That formula causes a brand new song to be used at least 4 times per year, and hopefully more. So a list of 10 to 20 great original songs should be sufficient. Some of my original songs are actually rewrites of old hymns. Perhaps I changed the chorus or totally changed the melody or the rhythm. Now if that's the case, that something new song also checks the something old box. And as in the case of an old hymn that I rewrote called Alas and Did My Savior Bleed, that one song actually checks 3 boxes. It is something old, something new, and something blue. For something borrowed, I would strongly urge you to lean heavily on the most up-to-date CCLI Top 100 list. To put it frankly, if the song you want to borrow is not on that list, it is probably not worth using. CCLI stands for Christian Copyright Licensing International. They track what songs are being sung in churches all over the world. Perhaps a more mild way of stating the importance of using the CCLI Top 100 is to say that if the song you want to use is not on that list, then you should probably consider it something new rather than something borrowed. I don't really keep a running list of songs that fit in the something blue category, but there are plenty of old, new, and borrowed songs that fit just fine. The overall idea here is to simply acknowledge that not everyone is entering the space at the same place emotionally, mentally, and physically. By applying this old adage, something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue, and treating each congregational worship service like a wedding, you can be sure to have a well-rounded approach that will edify the largest possible number of people. In doing so, you'll be like the scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven that Jesus spoke of. What was one interesting truth or idea that stood out to you today? And how do you plan to implement that truth or idea in the future? Do you currently have a system for selecting songs for your weekly congregational worship sets? What is your current system? In what ways do you think your system is better or worse than the system that was laid out in this chapter? How important do you think it is to include something old, something new, something borrowed, and something blue in each weekly congregational worship set? Why do you feel this way? In what ways do you think selecting songs for a weekly congregational worship set is like the scribe that Jesus spoke about in Matthew 13? In what ways does the comparison break down? Do your current weekly congregational worship sets feel well-rounded to you, or is something missing? If something seems to be missing, what is it?